For all the things that we don't know about birds that existed in the past, there are some things that we can see for certain, and that is, the birds that still exist today. Time and time again, species will evolve convergent traits due to similar environmental pressures. It is therefore often safest and most reasonable to look at what we still have around today when trying to comment on or reconstruct extinct species. And with the release of a new scientific paper, it's time to once again start making some theories, here on Deciphering the Dodo. For those of you who don't know, a few weeks ago there was a new dodo research paper released, which shares some rather significant information and gives us a lot more to think about. Most notably, the paper suggests that the dodo may have been either crepuscular or nocturnal, and as a result, the way we think about and reconstruct this bird may be likely to change. I will go over a few other bits that the paper points out in this video, and I'll share my thoughts and opinions later on. But first, let's look at a comparison between birds that I think could possibly fill the same niche as the dodo. First of all, kiwis, a flightless nocturnal bird that evolved without mammalian predators. While it may share these similarities with dodos, there's also quite a few differences too. The way that kiwis feed on underground invertebrates with their long, probing beaks is likely quite different from how dodos would have fed. Kiwis did also have to worry about avian predators, which could have been the reason why they became nocturnal in the first place. To our knowledge, the dodo didn't have any predators as an adult. But there are other benefits to being nocturnal, especially if you live on an island which is mostly dominated by birds and no terrestrial mammals. That being that the nocturnal niche that is typically filled by mammals is left completely open, as of course most birds are diurnal, and so perhaps dodos were active at night to avoid competition from diurnal birds, and even the tortoises that they shared their island with. So just like the kiwi, the dodo may have filled the nocturnal niche that is typically taken by mammals. While I've seen some people comparing the dodo to kiwis, I haven't seen many people comparing them to what I think would be more appropriate, the kakapo, or kakapo, because pigeons, including the dodo, are more closely related to parrots than they are to kiwis, and they're seemingly random ratite relatives. I have made this comparison before in the past. Considering the only living flightless parrot also has a deep booming call to attract mates from a long distance, it stands to reason that the dodo could have had something similar. But my bird brain got thinking again. What if the bare patch of skin on the dodo's face actually forms a facial disc? Or, more like the feathers around the bare patch. Birds that are active at night, and that often rely more on hearing, can have facial discs to help them channel sound into their ears. The most clear example of this can be seen in owls, but also the kakapo, and so perhaps the dodo's unusual face acted more as a satellite dish, picking up sound when visibility was poor. While of course this is speculative, the dodo's ears seem to be conveniently placed at the border of the feathers, within a little dip. The kakapo is utterly bizarre for a parrot, having a lek breeding system where the males boom for the attention of the females. This sort of behaviour would be more believable coming from a pigeon, not a parrot. This also shows how a single bird can be so unique from the rest in its order, and how islands can alter a species in such a dramatic way. Even if the dodo was only active at night to call out to others, there's still a benefit. There's less sound competition from diurnal birds, but also sounds often travel better at night. This is due to cooler nighttime temperatures and calmer air, which allows sounds to stay clearer and travel further without thermal distortion. So if dodos wanted to attract or locate their mates, it was probably better for them to do it at night. If you're wondering why more birds don't call at night, it's often because they wouldn't want to attract nocturnal predators that they can't see very well. But of course, the dodo didn't have to worry about this, well, at least for most of its existence. Dodos might not have just been listening out for their conspecifics, but maybe also small invertebrates in leaf litter, rustling around. It's not exactly clear as to how herbivorous the dodo was, but they could have quite likely eaten some invertebrates from time to time, alongside their more regular plant matter. I've also already spoken about the next bird in a previous video, so I'll try to keep it brief, but there's some important points to consider. I still think, in a similar way to the blue ground dove, the dodo probably would have been sexually dimorphic, but the paper points out that dodos probably wouldn't have had good night vision. So what's the point in being a different colour if they can't even see it? Even though they might not have been able to see well, they could probably see areas of high contrast, such as the white eyes and white tail seen on males. You may think that if both kakapo and kiwis are colours that blend into the environment, the dodo would surely be the same. But unlike those birds from New Zealand that had to worry about avian predators, dodos likely had no predators, as I've previously mentioned, which means they probably didn't have to blend into the environment so much. I suppose it's also possible that dodos could have had a lek breeding system like the kakapo. It's all well and good comparing the dodo to all these wild birds, but by far the easiest bird to observe and research would be the feral or domestic pigeon. Of course, most of you probably know that pigeons can puff out their chests, and it's quite likely that dodos would have done something similar, which may be why they look quite fat in some depictions. But one thing to note about pigeons is that they're monogamous. They form pair bonds, with both the male and female taking turns sitting on the nest. So if the dodo also followed this trend, it's a bit more tricky to explain the sexual dimorphism, and this had me stumped for a little while, until I remembered that they had timed intervals for their nest duties, with the male often taking the day shift and the female taking the night shift. This could therefore mean that if male dodos take over the nest duty during the day, their chicks could easily see them. But at night it would be harder for them to see their mother, which is why she has a blue patch on her beak, which could act as a target for the baby dodo to reach up into its mother's mouth. As not only is the blue quite distinctive, but birds can also see ultraviolet light, so this patch may have been even brighter to them. Now granted, I don't really know of any real-world example of this, but the study of biofluorescence is still relatively new. I will say that there's not much ultraviolet light at night, so this theory would lean more towards crepuscular chick feeding. Now that was going to be the end of my comparisons, but owls have a few other similarities too. The paper points out that dodos had large eyes, so they were probably trying to see something, but just not in very good detail. As I've already said, I believe this would have been conspecifics. But the paper also points out just how strange the dodo's skull is. It's very different from other columbiform skulls, both in appearance and structure. Most columbiform skulls look very similar, but dodos have an extra thickening at the top of their skulls, in a similar way to some owls. Now I'm not entirely sure what this could be used for, but maybe it could help them hear in some way, potentially helping with catching sound? To be honest, with quite a few research papers, you're left with more questions than answers. Like, they also found that there may be gender differences in sense of smell, but that's only based on 2 skulls, so it's quite hard to say. I could maybe theorise that this might be because, while the female is on the nest at night, the male goes around in the dark searching for food, and so would need a better sense of smell. But again, that's very speculative, like this entire video. So overall, do I think dodos were nocturnal? No. Well, probably not entirely. I instead think they were probably cathemeral, being active at points throughout the day and night, depending on a variety of factors like season, location, nesting, gender. Some old written accounts hint that dodos could have been active at points during the day, but I also think there's decent evidence to suggest they could have been active at night.